Hey, how you doing? It's me, Nomad here, and so today, what I want to do is begin a series for newbies, for urban nomad newbies or RV newbies, or it's not just RVs, but any kind of alternative living where you're not paying rent, you're not paying a mortgage, and you're breaking free of the system. So I get lots of questions from people. About this, and it's something I've been wanting to do. So I'm going to do it starting today. So it's going to be a whole series. Not sure what to call it yet, but yeah. So I guess the first question is, why should you do this? like why? Like, what's the purpose of it? So let's see. I guess the main purpose is that it allows you an alternative way to break out of the system. So like I've said in many of my other videos, the problem is that the current model of the system is that you're supposed to go to school, the drill. You go to school, get a degree, get a job, then you start living this lifestyle, right, that we see on the TV, normal life. You move out of your parents' place, and then you get your own apartment, you're paying rent, you get a good rental history, you build up your credit, you get some credit cards, and then you buy a bunch of stuff, and you get a car payment, because you gotta have a car payment to have good credit. Credit is such a scam, man. Anyway, so then eventually you save up while you're paying rent. You save up enough mortgage so that you can, your down payment for your mortgage, so you can finally buy a house. And you go buy a $500,000 house if you live in LA, or even $250,000. Man, $250,000. I don't know why people throw these numbers around nowadays as if this is totally normal, to spend $250,000 on a house. Like, just think about it. It's like, no, I'll just do it anyway. That's what everyone's doing anyway. So you buy your house, you wait. I knew a lady, I think she told me she saved 10 years. Maybe it was 20 years. I don't know. She finally got that down payment, got her credit perfect, and finally bought that house. Is this an accomplishment? They say, oh, the way to build wealth in America is you gotta have some real estate. You gotta own your house, right? It's all a scam, man. But sure, people can do that path, and people have done that path. I have people in my family that have done that path successfully. They have nice corporate jobs, and they, bought houses, and those houses have appreciated in value, and they're great. But anyway, so you do that, you get your house, and then hopefully it goes up, hopefully it doesn't go down. If it goes down, you're kind of screwed unless you have a lot of excess capital and a good cushy job that holds you through. But maybe it'll go up, whatever. There's a lot of fees involved, whatever. The point is, you're paying your life insurance, you're investing in your 401k, and maybe when you're around your 50s, if you've been doing this for a good 40 years, 30 years, maybe you can retire, finally, at 65 or whatever. And yeah, I have family members that have done that too. I know people that have done that. That's fine. That's a path, right? But it's kind of a long, arduous path, and I don't know if that's really the path for everyone. And when times get tough like they are now, like right now as I'm recording this, we're going through the pandemic and the economic downturn. Lots of people are unemployed or being laid off on unemployment, whatever. It's like, it's scary, right? So I used to be a part of that system. And here, in the description, you can see links to my video on this channel where I talk about how I got here, my story, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to repeat it, but I was forced to break out of the system. It was really scary. It was kind of like Neo in the Matrix when he, goes into the Matrix and pops out. That's kind of what happened to me in a way. And it was a real awakening to me, to a whole nother way of living that I just was completely oblivious to. And I wish I knew it earlier. It's something I'm trying to sell my kids on, because my kids are like going down that same, either they're going down that consumer path and they're struggling, or they're just lost, right? Like they're working some job that is bringing some money, but they're not really getting ahead. And everyone's like, go back to school. It's the same old freaking drama. And what I've learned is that there's an alternative way that's better. I mean, I think it's better. I think it's more natural and better. So we can argue about that. If you want to argue with me about that, let's argue in the comments. But basically, I think this is a good thing, the urban nomad living or alternative living. And what do I mean? It's better. But what do I mean by that? Is that you're not paying rent anywhere. You're not paying a mortgage, and you're pretty much debt free. I mean, you might have a little debt, but it's not catastrophic debt like a mortgage or a car payment. Like, what I mean by that is, like, if for some reason you can't pay that debt, you're not gonna like lose your car or your shelter, which you never want to do anyway. So, but this is a way that allows people to, do a more natural way of life, which, so the natural way of life, let's talk about that. So, okay, but before we talk about that, the natural way of life, we have to kind of talk about the system that we're in. And so we're in kind of an economic matrix, and we don't realize we're in it because we've been born into it. It's sort of like Neo in the Matrix. That's why I use that analogy, because it's very similar, and you're born into it, and you're kind of taught these things from a very young age, that you should do this if you want to succeed, do that, blah blah blah. You want to make money make you happy, blah 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 blah. And you get all caught up in this thing, and I'm a total product of that. Like, I did that whole thing, went to a really good school and did all kinds of high-end tech jobs, and I lived that thing, and it's horrible, right? Something was wrong. And I'm not saying people can't pursue that path. If you're happy pursuing that path, good for you. But I know a lot of people, either of all the income levels, are not happy with their life situation, and it looks pretty bad.
The matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window, or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
So this system we're in is really not designed for us, okay? We are its slaves. So just like in the Matrix, when Morpheus tells Neo that he is a slave, it's very similar. I'm telling you, you are a slave. I mean, I can't really say that for sure. Who knows? Maybe you're one of the slave owners, so you're not a slave. But for a lot of people, we are economic slaves to the system. And sure, you're like, oh, I'm free, I can do whatever, I'm not a slave. One of the definitions of slavery is that you're forced to do the thing. Well, you may not have a gun in your head or a whip on your back, but you have metaphorical or mental whips and foots on your back. And one of the big ways is through debt and real estate and rent and mortgages and debt, more debt, right? Having it be tied to your living puts an immense amount, having it be tied to your shelter puts an immense amount of pressure on you, to where you might as well have a gun to your head. I mean, it's really scary, right? The idea of losing your housing or something, or losing your car, or losing your job. And what am I gonna do, right? So, it is a system, and when your eyes open up to this, you see it. You're like, whoa, I see it now, right? It's all over the freaking place. Anyway, the main point of this is that this is the wealth. This system is designed to funnel wealth up to, like you've heard this, to the 1% or the top 10%. Basically the landowners, basically the people that own every freaking thing. Which I'm gonna include a link in this video to a really good graphic that shows the income inequality in America, and this pretty much breaks it down.
Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change, and the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976, they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
This video has only it doesn't have a lot of views. I'm like, everyone needs to freaking see this video. I don't know why people aren't up in arms over this video. Maybe they don't want to accept it, deal with it, or acknowledge the reality of their situation. Because this video breaks down really well. I mean, so there's the data right there. It shows that, I think I've heard a statistic since 1970, 90% of the income gains or wealth gains have gone to the top percent, 1 to 10%. And so, that's there. It's out there. Just search it, Google it, income inequality. You'll see this all over the place. Yeah, but you know what? It's okay, because people are taught, oh, well, I'll be different. I'll be different, right? Sure, we'll all be different. So I'll just work harder, work 3 jobs. I'll weasel my way through, and I won't be like those other sheep. I'll be a different sheep. It's like, whatever. I used to think that way. So you need to understand that. The system is just against us economically. And so a lot of the messages that we get from the media is really designed to get us to do what the system wants us to do, right? Which is that system I just told you about, that process of you want to get a good job, you need to get a degree at this school, blah, blah, blah. By the way, when they're running commercials for anything that they claim is going to benefit you, you need to realize how much they're paying for that commercial. And they're only paying for that commercial because they think they can make more money. I don't care if it's a nonprofit university or a for-profit school or some kind of program or whatever it is, some financial advice. It's the same deal, right? So you need to sit back and think, what's in it for them? Why are they selling me this message, right? So the thing is we're taught that, we have to do all those things, and it can just seem like an arduous task. And you just don't, it's just, I just know so many millennials in particular, and Gen Z types, that are kind of lost. So they have all this stuff about passion and purpose now, and it's and this group is kind of lost, oh, I want to do this, but I don't know how. And then they see Jay-Z or someone with $1 million. Oh, I think I'll go get $1 million and I'll be happy. And then they go down that path. But my point is just that a lot of this stuff is propaganda. It's what I call capitalist propaganda. And so, sure, you hear capitalism and you think, oh, what's wrong with capitalism? Blah, blah, blah. It's socialism, capitalism. Oh, socialism is bad. Are you a socialist? Whatever. And the bottom line is there is a thing that's capitalist propaganda, and it's designed to get you in, plug you into that matrix to feed that, top percent, right? The bottom line is we want to break out of that matrix, and we want to be truly free individuals, or at least as free as we can possibly be, which is actually kind of difficult in this so-called free society that America supposedly is. So that's what Urban Nomads is all about, and that's what, alternative living is all about. There's other channels about this subject, but, people seem to think or have been indoctrinated with when I say indoctrination, that's what I'm talking about. This idea that oh, it's really hard to do that, or it's really hard to break out, or one of the big propaganda messages is that you need $1 million to be free or financially independent or all this. That's definitely propaganda. If they can convince you of that, then you'll work like a dog trying to make more money, or that you got to retire, you got to be financially independent. Be independent, you got to have $10 million. Now $1 million is not enough anymore. Oh no, you need some passive income, blah, 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 blah. All these messages, so much of them are not really for you, or not really to help you. They're really to just get you working for the people above you, and it's a pyramid, right? So it's like there's layers, and each layer is working for the layer above it, right? Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that we can break free of that system. And when I was kicked out of the Matrix or popped out, I discovered that there's this whole other way of living. I had just, the thing that triggered it for me was the question, if I just stop thinking in terms of rent, what will happen? And that's when my eyes opened up, when I started asking these questions and opening my minds to new possibilities. Is it possible to live without paying rent? Like I said, up until that point, I thought I had to have $1 million, I had to have all this money, and I was working hard to do that. But as I opened my mind to that question, then those answers came. It's like, yes, there is actually alternative ways. And I have a video in the link also I'll put called how to, I think it's like 10 ways to live rent free or whatever. But basically, there is an alternate way, and I call it the natural way. So the natural way is what we see in a lot of third world countries, what we see in a lot of poor, what we call, quote unquote, poor areas, and our system teaches us to look down on that. Like, oh, those poor people in that hut in Peru or Mexico or wherever, Guatemala, whatever, they're living in that little shack and they don't have anything and they're poor. And, maybe they are poor in a way, but they may own their land, they may own their house, and, maybe they are self-sufficient that way. Now, they may feel poor, they may not have a lot of dollars, but here's what I think the natural way is that God wanted us to have, okay? Like, it's basically like the way indigenous people were living and have lived, which is that, a person goes out and they get a little piece of land somewhere and they work that land, and then basically they build on that land, make it a farm or whatever, they build a house on it, they work with their neighbors, maybe they have a little village, they all own their land and their houses, and they work together to build up their, their lifestyle or whatever, the wealth, the common wealth that they all have. I feel like that's the natural way, and we can still have that. It's just in our society right now, you kind of have to hack the system to get there, because of banks and mortgages and stuff, everything is inflated in its pricing. So like if you're in LA right now, you can't just go claim some land. There's no land. Even the tiniest, ugliest lot is going to cost $100,000. So you can't do that here. I mean, you'd have to go way out in the desert, and then maybe you find some cheap land. But there are ways to kind of hack the system. They can't take every piece of land. And so, but my point is, I just kind of want you to understand that you can plug into this natural system. So in the natural system, you get a little piece of property and you improve it over time. It gets better and better. Eventually, maybe it starts producing something for you, or it allows you to produce something else. Maybe it's a farm, whatever it is, right? And then you grow and you get stronger and you get better. Like, that's the natural way. I mean, sure, there's maintenance involved. You got to maintain the property or the asset or the land, right? But what is not natural, that we've been indoctrinated to think is natural, is this idea that, like, you're supposed to go rent someone else's land. And somehow in this backwards math, and I'm gonna do another video called, good money math versus bad money math. And I just was so indoctrinated with thinking that bad money math was good, which is what they want you to do. They want you to think that, So you just keep doing stupid stuff that is bad for you, right? Economically, right? And so one of the dumbest things is to think that, oh, I'm going to pay this rent and somehow I'm going to get better, even though, $1,000, $1,500, all this money is going to my landlord, which improves his property. And I know this because my mom was in real estate and we had rental properties, and I totally understand how it works. And there's tons of, just Google passive rental income, and you can see the other side of this, which, real estate people are like, oh yeah, get an apartment building and rent out those apartments. And, it's like you're a virtual slave, like, get some slaves. It's a modern day way of getting some slaves in a way. So I guess my point is just that, like, there's a more natural way where you can grow slowly, right? So one of those ways is to get a vehicle, right? So if you're in a city, so alternative living covers basically like vehicle living, RV living, boat living, van life, homesteading, tiny houses, building your own house on some land or whatever. It's that whole realm, right? And basically, I'm going to focus more on urban nomad, the urban nomad part, which is where you're trying to hack out this kind of life in the city, which pretty much limits you to vehicle living and boat living. Yeah, but that's my experience, so that's what I want to talk about the most. But a lot of these ideas apply to almost any of those situations. It's more of a philosophy and a state of mind and attitude.